My favorite planet name is Saturn. It has a nice ring.
Of Central and Eastern Europe. Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, Bucharest and Sofia. Today a new Iron Curtain is descending. It encloses the small Missouri town where Churchill gave his speech and all the great capitals of a great nation. Behind the Iron Curtain lie New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia and countless others. It covers 1 million streets and hundreds of millions of people. Its shadow passes over stores and factories, homes and schools. It is not a physical wall. There are, as of yet, no border guards with rifles waiting to shoot those wanting to leave. There are no watchtowers or leashed dogs keeping an eye on the inner frontier. It is a wall of words. A wall of laws, regulations and mandates. The 2012 Federal Register had 78,961 pages. There are 11 million words of Obamacare regulations alone. With so many regulations, everyone violates a few of them without even knowing it. Assemble all the millions of them together and you have a great wall that would dwarf anything in China. The American Iron Curtain is still made out of paper, but in time it will be made out of cement and iron. Tyrannies begin with paper, but end with metal.
Company, always on the run. A destiny, oh, it's the rising sun. I was born, a shotgun in my hands. Behind the gun, I'll make my final stand. Yeah, and that's why they call me Bad Company. I can't deny bad company till the day I die. Until the day I die. Until the day I die. why they call me bad company. I won't deny. Bad company till the day I die. Until 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 the day I die.
Has failed everywhere. Its ruins dot the Russian landscape. Its corpses fill the tundra from Asia to Europe. Its victims cry out across thousands of miles. The statues of its visionaries fill the scrap heaps of the East, and its empty fields and abandoned factories can be found on every continent. But everywhere there are men who need to believe in the supremacy of the state, in the closed system, the Iron Dream and the Iron Curtain, in 78,000 pages of regulations and all their millions and millions of words, in the nudge, the mandate, the law, the bill and the billy club. These are the dreamers of the Iron Dream. The professors who tell their students to change the world by enslaving others to their iron dream. The newsreaders and entertainers who vividly paint the joys of living in the iron dream and the horrors of life outside it. The activists who crowd around shouting for the iron dream in the name of the people. The American Iron Curtain. In March 1946, Winston Churchill told a Missouri audience, "From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe. Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, Bucharest and Sofia. Today a new Iron Curtain is descending. It encloses the small Missouri town where Churchill gave his speech and all the great capitals of a great nation. Behind the Iron Curtain lie New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia and countless others. It covers 1 million streets and hundreds of millions of people. Its shadow passes over stores and factories, homes and schools. It is not a physical wall. There are, as of yet, no border guards with rifles waiting to shoot those wanting to leave. There are no watchtowers or leashed dogs keeping an eye on the inner frontier. It is a wall of words. A wall of laws, regulations and mandates. The 2012 Federal Register had 78,961 pages. There are 11 million words of Obamacare regulations alone. With so many regulations, everyone violates a few of them without even knowing it. Assemble all the millions of them together and you have a great wall that would dwarf anything in China. The American Iron Curtain is still made out of paper, but in time it will be made out of cement and iron. Tyrannies begin with paper, but end with metal. The state begins by imposing bureaucracy on a free people and ends by imposing tyranny on them. When they will not obey the paper, it resorts to steel, iron and lead. 4 decades after Churchill invoked the Iron Curtain, in his Evil Empire speech Reagan named the Soviet enemy as those who preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, predict its eventual domination of all peoples of the earth. They are the focus of evil in the modern world, he said. Quoting C.S. Lewis, he warned that the greatest evil is conceived and ordered, moved, seconded, carried and minuted, in clear, carpeted, warmed, and well-lighted offices, by quiet men with white collars and cut fingernails and smooth-shaven cheeks who do not need to raise their voice. That is the struggle now before us. We do not fight men with nuclear missiles or red armies of freezing conscripts waiting to march through Europe. Instead we fight against an evil empire that has arisen in our cities and its red army of front groups that insinuate their ideas into every institution they take control of. Conservatives have lost the ability to lay out the stakes in the clear and simple language of a Churchill or a Reagan, to let the people know that they are not choosing between politicians, but choosing whether they will be able to have the car of their choice.
Ken Luevan Jelja ganse speden Chwala meri vinjog si djerach Shine foskal na keken wan Vagrian se chwan go shieldag Zreed gaat hier I jansen niermalt Nuede ein noi kukianal Amangul darst chwan Hoshich jelt na heiger I toerling Slup am brun gekun na vloering Heet je guna hoit jak churi Besurach togach kwan Glees an jina kval na horein Shevis gjum mar gruch gan ogvies Svan je shel gering gani Hamachel varst chwan Hier en was jersner ilten Jovan rimes knilmen speden Hei en oi braun galire Skara og gift ham son Jan mi farsked rilten an okven Hein möguller huan var sjolver Opevinja gøyren bronach Hamagul darst chwan Reining gjolde gjon ma halig Blodar I vinten blahu Sigun I dishen arsderi Gjen ma grach I darst chwan Vakrile gulg og skanjug Nå jeg lakken I hinjet laivi Kjepti ut og upp hasavalj Hir mi slan var darst chwan
My love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love is like the melody that's sweetly sung in tune. As fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I. And I will love thee still, my dear, till all the seas gone dry. Till all the seas gone dry, my love, and the rocks melt away the sun. And I will love thee still, my dear, while the sands of life shall run. And fare thee well, my only love, and fare thee well a while, and I will come again, my love, yours and mine. Ah, mine was like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, mine rose like the melody that's sweetly played in tune. As fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I, and I will love thee still, my dear, till all the seas gang dry, till all the seas gang dry, my dear, till all the seas gang dry, and I will love thee still, my dear, till all the seas gang dry.
Their weapon is a secret seduction technique. Their means, sex. Their traps caught hundreds of influential men, such as British Prime Minister John Profumo, French Ambassador Maurice Dijon, Fidel Castro Jr., even Adolf Hitler. They were all victims of the girls from a special NKVD department, a division involved in the most effective kind of intelligence, sex spying. For the first time, we're going to describe the seduction techniques that were used by the Soviet sex scout and reveal the classified names. Hitler's favorite actress was Olga Chekhov. Kat, a famous radio operator of the 17 Moments of Spring, was in fact a scout, Anna Kameva. All of them, as well as dozens of other women in the NKVD, were not known by their names, but by a unique number, and were all called the Swallows. The secret department was created in 1937 under Stalin's order. The Soviet beauties were brought to Moscow for casting. The selection was made by a committee consisting of the best physicians, gynecologists, and psychiatrists. The head of NKVD, Nikolai Eshov, directed the casting himself. Out of hundreds of applicants, he had to choose 20 to be the first students of the Soviet Secret School of Sex Intelligence. In 6 months, the best scouts of the USSR will leave this school resembling female robots, devoid of fear and complexes. It was like a production line with a single template, white-skinned, slim and sexy, with a code number instead of a name, and with the nickname The Swallow. Coming up next, The secret schools of sex intelligence in the USSR, the prostitute secrets and spies training, the methodology of the honey trap, the shocking instructions on how to seduce men, the sex weapon in the war of the world's intelligence services, how Marshal Tukhachevsky's fatal mistake initiated a Soviet sex espionage. In 1937, the Soviet Union undergoes Stalin's repression. Teachers, doctors, and military commanders disappear because of the NKVD. Every day, the intelligence agency's archives received hundreds of packages marked red. The case is closed. The sentence is execution. Mikhail Tukhachevsky came round as the icy cold was penetrating his body. The water made him regain consciousness. He couldn't see or feel a thing. His swollen body no longer responded to the assaults. Tukhachevsky lost track of time. The only thing that seemed to exist was this dark, damp room and some people asking him to sign some papers. He resisted for a while, but he eventually gave up. He did everything they demanded in order to stop the torture. The Chekists kept their word and stopped beating Tukhachevsky. He was shot the same night in the Lubyanka courtyard. The famous marshal, the Civil War hero Mikhail Tukhachevsky, never understood what he'd done wrong. In the evening before his death, he had signed a confession composed by the NKVD. He declared that he was recruited by a German spy. He wasn't able to read the document as he was almost blind by the assaults. Tukhachevsky died without knowing that he was betrayed by his own mistress. Josephine Hensey was a beautiful singer at the Officers' Club. But in reality, she was a German spy. Protégé of Admiral Canaris, the head of the German intelligence. She planned to recruit Tukhachevsky for the secret cooperation with the German intelligence service, but all she achieved was a sexual affair. The marshal was arrested before he could realize what had happened. But this didn't save him from an execution. Reading NKVD's report about the singer's underground activities, Stalin angrily remarked, "She is a beautiful woman, a scout. She recruited Tukhachevsky and Karahan with her petticoat. She even recruited Yenukitsa. She had Rudzutak in her hands. In short, all the Red Army elite." This was an exemplary case, and Stalin first realized how valuable a sex-related intelligence could be. He decided that Germany deserved a similar response and started training women for professional sex espionage. The Soviet secret services added sexual espionage to their work. In the autumn of 1937, according to the orders of Nikolai Eshov, the head of the NKVD, the Soviet beauties, who had been carefully selected, were brought to Moscow. It wasn't difficult to find girls like that. The propaganda was impeccable, and many girls wished they could serve their motherland. Only the best would make it to the top 20. Besides beauty, the girls should have good health and strong nerves, and that was exactly what the Special Commission was going to check out. Gynecologists, therapists, and psychologists filled each applicant's forms. Due to my profession, I had to meet women from the sex industry. I should say, they all had a certain professional deformity. They are very obedient. You say go, and she goes. Stand, and she stands. Sit here, and she sits where she was told. A woman like that is used to satisfying a man's whims. But obedient wasn't all the sex spies had to be. They must look like docile, depraved women, but they mustn't forget about their job, not for one moment. That's why it was necessary to choose psychologically stable and uninhibited women, a real problem for the Soviet Union, who was under Stalinist repression. It was important to make the right choice. That's why the commission was led by the head of the NKVD himself, Nikolai Eshov. The People's Commissar was unbiased in his evaluation, as he had a soft spot for men, a fact that was discussed in the government circles. Although Eshov tried to conceal his sexual preferences, his attempts had failed. When Eshov would be later removed from his post, he was accused of sodomy, terrorism, and espionage. As evidence, the court had the testimony of two of the Commissar's lovers, the deputy chief of the Leningrad factory, Svetoch Ivan Dementiev, and the Red Army Commissar, Vladimir Konstantinov. But Eshov wasn't officially condemned for his homosexuality, which Stalin could not tolerate. Due to fear of publicity, the verdict was adjusted to the spirit of the time. Eshov was shot as a spy and state criminal. He was replaced by a Stalin's ally, Lavrenti Beria, a Swan Lake and ballet dancer's lover. The selection of the Soviet swallows was under his personal control, caring more about his own interests than of the state. Beria regularly forced singers or even schoolgirls to join the ranks of sex school intelligence. The audition took place in his bed. Somebody had to give sex lessons to the selected girls. Beria reasoned that the best way would be to find representatives of the most ancient profession. In 1938, in the midst of the repression, regular raids were performed on the secret brothels that existed under the disguise of sewing studios and apartments. The brothels were destroyed and the prostitutes were thoroughly examined, and some of them were sent to Siberia, while others were released from custody to perform a very important state task. According to the law, the ladies of the night, being the class enemies, had to spend several years in strict regime camps. An exception was made for the most experienced girls. They became the sex mentors of the Soviet swallows. With the students and the teachers in place, the secret school started its first lessons. It's hard to believe that the sex spy courses that produced uninhibited and seductive women started at a time when a different image of women was promoted throughout society. The ideal Soviet woman has a coarse, ardent face with an inspiring look. Her job is to work, have children, and carry out her duty to the society. She had to be dull and inconspicuous, and most importantly, asexual. While the majority of Soviet women denied their natural sexuality, things were different in the Moscow Lubyanka. The selected beauties were taught how to undress quickly. The swallows were sitting naked during the lesson. The education was split into 3 stages. The first was educational. During the first 6 months, the students should learn several foreign languages, etiquette, dancing, and expand their general knowledge. The goal was to be able to arouse their interlocutor's interest within reasonable limits, so that their great intellect would become repulsive. The second stage consisted of 3 parts, the first being psychological treatment. They were led through their base instincts so that their spirituality would be numbed. The girls consciously served an idealistic aim. After the psychological treatment, these women were convinced that everything they were taught was for their homeland's sake. There is no need to analyze it using common sense. The second phase included exercises on sexual looseness and freedom from restraint. Every self-respecting Soviet man visited a public bath. People would willingly spend hours queuing. The Soviet swallows were also there, but they were brought in secretly during the special cleanup days. In a steam room, the NKVD men were waiting for the girls to wash together. Thus, the future scouts lost their shame and learned not to be bashful. After the testing in the bathhouses, the last phase of the second part of the training followed. The seduction of the stranger, with no intimacy yet. The NKVD organized bogus dates for the swallows. They showed a victim and let the girls go for one evening. If the future sex spy was able to interest a man and arouse his sexual desire, she passed the test and proceeded to the final stage of the training, the study of sexual prowess. In an autumn day in 1938, a special lesson was given to a small audience. The students scrutinized a naked man who stood in the middle of the audience. They only stopped looking in order to write in their notebooks. This lesson wasn't part of the Academy of Art. The naked man was not a male model for life drawing. He was the main sex tutorial for the Soviet swallows, an NKVD officer. With his help, an experienced hooker teaches the girls how to make a man excited with just one touch and how to bring him extreme pleasure. All these recommendations were also published in a booklet, but the public never saw it. The brochure was only used in the sex spy school to train new swallows. These lessons were only being published in the early 90s. Former swallow Veronica made a sensational confession. By the time we finished our training, we had become cynical, sexually sophisticated girls. By the time we finished our training, we had become cynical, sexually sophisticated girls. Coming up next, the secret tricks of the Soviet sex spies. How did they seduce a man and make him reveal his secrets? We will disclose the contents of the secret NKVD sex manual, applied sexual lessons, orgies within the Central Committee, the first military flight of the swallows, the mystery of the radio operator Kat. How did Adolf Hitler become a victim of sex spying? They already know how to be relaxed and lascivious. They have thoroughly studied all the weaknesses of the stronger sex. They know all the erogenous zones and are able to pleasure them. They don't give way to their hang-ups. Now it's time to reveal the mystery of the seduction technique which got men talking without realizing it. How exactly did the swallows awaken such strong sexual desire in men? First, they prepared a mixture of herbs, verbena, lavage, and rue. Even at the time, it was scientifically proven that the combination of these three components awakens male potency. It happens on a subconscious level, regardless of the victim's will. This mixture has to be carefully rubbed on the skin, hair, and clothes. If it wasn't possible to apply the herbs, the swallows used anything that was available, such as the secretion of their own sex glands, which they applied behind their ears. A man becomes completely helpless and follows the woman against his will. He will give anything just to possess her. This method worked flawlessly, except in certain situations, such as when the client had a cold. If this was the case, the swallows had another weapon in their arsenal: imipramine, cocaine in its pure form or mixed with alcohol. These cocktails enhanced sexual desire and also blunted the customer's attention as well as his memory.
So here's where the rubber meets the road. 2014, in February, the protesters seize Kyiv as the president flees. The president of Ukraine is taken out by the people of Ukraine. This is the first critical date. It gives people the opportunity to save the day. Now, if you remember all of the Halliburton stuff that we heard under Bush, when a country is destabilized and goes to hell in a handbasket, it is a chance for people to do all kinds of things, especially if they partner with the new people. So we made partner of the new president. Now, Halliburton, 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 remember that? Left cared about that. Halliburton, Halliburton, Halliburton. The media was all over George W. Bush. Corruption, corruption, corruption. Why have you not heard anything about what I'm going to show you? So in February 2014, this becomes the new president, total upheaval. They have no money. They're completely broke. And here comes the United States of America. In March of that year, President Obama says, we're from the United States government, and we're here to help. So he decides, you know who you need? You know who you can need, because you're very corrupt. This is a very corrupt place, and it is. And we're going to help you, and we got lots of money. We can print it, whatever we want. So we got lots of money, but we've done this before, and we did it with TARP, and we spent all kinds of money, but we wanted to make sure that all of that reinvestment in America was clean, no corruption, and so we put Joe Biden in charge. So Joe is going to be the new point man in Ukraine. Okay, so then Joe, in March of that year, a month later, he has a quick little meeting because his son just started a new business. I love this. He started a new business, and he was going to be an investment banker, right? Investment guy. And they were going to do all this investment funds, and it was going to be fantastic. He has no experience in that. He partners with John Kerry's son, and this guy, Devon Archer. This guy is John Kerry's, is his financial guy. I spent 30 minutes at a chalkboard just talking about this scandal. You can find it at YouTube. You can find it at blazetv.com. It is Joe Biden's scandal in Ukraine, okay? So he meets with Devon Archer. I'm going to give you this real quick. He meets with Devon Archer. Nothing to do with Ukraine. And then in April, he flies to Ukraine. And guess what? So does he. And in May of that year, he is made a board member of a gas company called Burisma. And guess who else is made on the board member? Hunter Biden. It is nice, it is cute, and nothing to see here, folks. Like I said, you can get more on that story. But this is pretty much the Biden story. It happens all here. You'll see it a little bit on the timeline, but it's very small. Here's where it gets good. Because this poor country is so corrupt, Barack Obama says, guys, we want to give you some money. We want to give you some money. But I gotta tell you, we're gonna have to watch over it. Now, let me show you how much money we're talking about. Riding in on the white horse to save the day with all kinds of U.S. aid to Ukraine, it included $1 billion sovereign loan guarantee, $320 million in general assistance, $118 million in equipment training for their security forces, $20 million for new law enforcement reform, and a fleet of advisors in banking and politics and energy and media and human rights. So they do that in May. You give them all kinds of money. And then because they're so corrupt, we mandate to this corrupt country that they start a national Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, because we can't trust the guys in the masks. A National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. It's fantastic. And you know who their partner is? Us, of course. We're not corrupt at all. So the guy who was tapped to be the first director of the Bureau is this guy, Artem, how do you say his name? Sitnik. Okay? He's the first director. And what's great is because he is now in charge of anti-corruption, he now has a direct line to the administration to talk about anything the Ukrainians might dig up, okay? Now, we get here. We get now to this place where we are dumping all of that aid in, but we're watching over it because we're responsible. And we were becoming a giant piggy bank. But we made some mistakes early on. Well, first, do you remember Burisma? Burisma was run by this guy. This guy is so corrupt that he couldn't come to the United States. He was never to be granted a visa to come to the United States because he's an oligarch. He not only runs Burisma, but he also has a bank. Whoa. So this guy gets the money for Burisma, $1.8 billion. It's put into his bank. I mean, who wouldn't put $1.8 billion in an oligarch, corrupt guy who can't come into the United States? He's so corrupt. Who wouldn't put it in that, right? Oopsie. It's like Monopoly. Bank made a banking error. Lost $1.8 billion. Where did it go? Well, he certainly didn't have anything to do with it because somehow or another, he at the same time is given a visa to come to the United States. He's not a bad guy anymore. Woo! Wow. Take a moment just to look at that for a second. Okay. Now, June of 2015, coming down the escalator at Trump Tower is Donald Trump. And he's like, make America great again. Got it? This is a big day, June 15th. By late 2015, we are the Ukrainian piggy bank. We are giving them all kinds of money, but we're also helping them with advisors. Oh, yes, we are. We are helping them with Greg Craig, the former Obama White House counsel. We have Tad Devine, chief strategist for Bernie Sanders, and Tony Podesta, brother to John Podesta. We also have Mark Penn, the chief strategist for Hillary Clinton. John Alazone, Obama campaign pollster. Another guy, John, the Obama campaign lead pollster. Oh my gosh, this is fantastic. When you need help, buddy, all you have to do is phone a friend. because all of these people are now working in Ukraine for you. You are our man. I cannot stress enough that the climate in Ukraine is all corrupt at this point. This is the climate that the Russia investigation begins in. Not the official investigation led by Robert Mueller. No. The unofficial investigation launched by none other than the DNC. Now this is where it gets really interesting. Back in the US in late 2015, while all of this is going on, the Democratic Party decides they're going to hire Alexandra Chalupa. Taco Bell, I apologize. The only person that could make a chalupa into a bad thing is her. Alexandra Chalupa, she's the daughter of a Ukrainian immigrant, and she began right away after she was hired doing opposition research on Donald Trump. Now remember, late 2015, June, he's coming down the escalator. The Democrats go right to work in Ukraine to find out dirt. Wow, do they have a little machine built there? Or how are they digging up dirt? Why would they do this in Ukraine? Here are the documents I want to show you that shows that, yes, she did indeed work. This is from opensecrets.org, that she did work for the DNC, and they paid her $71,918. There you see it in the monitor. All right? That's just for her work during the 2016 election. But her work with the DNC goes all the way back to 2004. Now, in January 2016, she starts to investigate. And Chalupa approaches an official at the DNC and says, regarding Donald Trump's campaign, I just feel that there's a Russia connection. Oh, you feel that? Wow. How the heck did you feel that? This is in January 2016. At that time, there was nothing out on Manafort, and Manafort wasn't even working for Donald Trump. There was no Steele dossier. George Papadopoulos wasn't on the campaign yet. There was no FISA request, even for Carter Page at this point. So she just, I don't know, maybe she had a Ouija board. Trump, R-U-S, I don't know. Could be Rush, could be Russia, I don't know. But I have this feeling. Wow. So she goes to work and she concentrates most of her corruption on, yes, who else? Paul Manafort. She wants to find out all about Paul Manafort. Now, Paul Manafort is somebody that I talked about during the election. I thought he was clearly dirty, okay? However, he was working with the now exited, the guy, remember the guy on the floor? He was trying to, can you grab that for me? He was trying to help this guy get elected. Remember, Obama had this guy. This guy had all of these people right at the other end of the phone. Manafort was trying to get this guy to go back to the election. Interesting enough, all of her energy was focused on Manafort and not the partners that were trying to get this guy elected. Who was trying to get him? No, him too, right? Who else was working on this? We have, oh yeah, here it is. Tad Devine and Tony Podesta. Now that's weird because they were working on the same thing. And they were in the same bed. And what's really crazy is she only wanted to focus on him. Nothing here. Now, the same month that Chalupa was telling the DNC that there was a Russia connection between Manafort and Trump, the Obama White House summoned some people. In fact, what they did is the White House, Obama gave a personal information to the prosecutors in Ukraine. Remember the National Anti-Corruption Bureau? Those guys and, like their attorney general, their regular police force, if you will, their national police force, was summoned to the White House. And Obama said, what we're going to do is we're going to build cooperation with Ukraine. Your anti-corruption bureau, which is fantastic, headed by this guy. Fantastic. Now, according to a political official at the Ukrainian embassy, the meeting immediately turned to two main issues: Biden and his son, and a case tied to Paul Manafort. You can probably guess which one they didn't investigate and which one they did. The deputy head of the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office said that upon returning back home from the Obama administration meeting in Washington, there was, quote, a clear message about helping the Americans. Regarding the Manafort case, he said, and I quote, yeah, there was a lot of talking about needing help, and then the ledger just appeared in public. What ledger? What are you talking about? I'll get back to that in a second. So, he brings him to the White House. They're concentrating on Paul Manafort. And remember, the White House also, according to sources that were there for this meeting, they also said they were being pressured not to look in to this. But remember, whoopsie, we're not talking about Joe Biden. I don't care what he did. What happened to my and your $1.8 billion? Why did you put it into this bank run by this guy who was totally corrupt, and then who said, he's not so bad, let him into America? After he took or lost, where did I put that $1.8 billion? Must have left it in his other jacket. We don't want to talk about that? You know, it's funny because one of the things they're saying is that Donald Trump pressured them to look in. What these guys are doing is they're pressuring them not to look at this. But now you've heard the story. Biden, forced the removal of Ukraine's general prosecutor. His name was Viktor Shokin. Okay? Bad guy. Everybody says bad guy. I don't know. He seems like a bad guy, and also some good things he was doing. But he was investigating a Ukrainian company that Biden's son was involved with. We all heard both sides of the story. Biden claimed what he did was purely based on Shokin's corrupt conduct and nothing to do with this. Except, one thing that bothers me is this meeting. This meeting where you sent the people back home and they all said, you didn't want us to look into that. And then Mr. Joe Biden comes in and he gets this guy fired. This is something that's probably worth looking at. This is a document of the sworn statement of the guy Joe Biden got fired that was recently obtained by the investigative journalist John Solomon. John Solomon is an award-winning investigative journalist that for 30 years worked for the Associated Press, the Washington Post, and the New York Times. He was fine then. He's outed people on both sides of the aisle. But all of a sudden, he's a conspiracy kook.